am.
Yeah, she's my editor. Kate and I go way back, but she has helped me through this process, still helping me through this process, from the very beginning to where we are at right now. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Aaron. Well, I'm super excited to be here. This is an amazing book, and it's one that I've seen grow from like ideas, sitting at French Meadow with Aaron and Christine and talking about it years ago, and me sort of not getting what they were talking about. Actually, I was like, okay, I can help you, I think, but I didn't understand. To then working with Aaron on it and trying to understand it. And part of the cool thing for me is when we started working together on this almost 2 years ago, I mean, I helped him with his book proposal, and then he sold the book like so fast, which doesn't happen, people. So I was like, okay, I told you not to send the query until we had the proposal, and he went and he did it, and then I was like, all right, I'll help you do this really fast. But the book sold, and then as I was kind of helping him, I was like, yeah, I can't run, my hip hurts, my shoulder hurts, like everything hurts, I can't do anything anymore. He's like, well, come in, I think I can help you. And I was like, okay, whatever. Went in there, and well, first he really hurt me. And anyone who's worked with Aaron, especially if it's one-on-one, and he was like, come on, go, you could do double that. And no, and actually you have to pull over afterward when you leave because you're gonna faint. That happened to me a couple times. But that's exactly what he did. Like, I went in there to try to, because I didn't totally understand the concepts yet, and it was gonna be helpful for me to go in and actually train with Aaron. And that's where the magic happened, and that's the magic that is in this book. And I'm running again. I mean, for me, that's like, I couldn't run for over a year, and now I can run. Like, good job, Aaron.
You did the work.
Only because you were like standing there hovering over me, like threatening me or something. I don't know, not in a good way. But so I'm just so excited because this is a book that will actually change lives. And the cool part about it is not like you're 25 and you're going to get out there and you can run a marathon, which I didn't do at 25 and I couldn't do at 25. But like some people do that. And then their bodies change. And this book is all about figuring out what do you do and how can you adjust what you're doing to help your body stay lean and fit and healthy. I mean, lean isn't even in the option. I mean, I think that's one of the things I really love about your philosophy and your whole book and everything that you do is it's all about longevity. So I wonder if you can talk a little bit about how longevity became a focus and how that influenced your training, how you work with clients.
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, as you tell your story of how you came into FIT and we started to work together, I have to share with you, this was, no, it was fine. But there was one time, so just so you know, if you haven't been in the studio, there's kind of this little area set up where we do personal training, and it's an open space, and so then right on the other side of the studio is like a group fitness class. And Kate was riding what we call an assault bike. And
the worst thing ever. It's honestly the worst thing in the world.
And there is, anyone who's ever worked with me knows that one of my focuses here is on helping people understand what I would call the intensity gap is. So like, really understanding kind of where the edge of what your capacity would be. Now we slowly build there. You made it sound a little dramatic.
I mean, I think it was the fourth, actually all the times I felt like I was gonna die, so I don't know.
But I was having Kate do these intervals on the assault bike, and there's a class of 15 or 20 people right on the other side of the studio. And she closed the intensity gap, I'll say that. And
I almost died.
She almost died. And when she finished the interval, she had worked so hard at it. She was so out of breath. She was hands on knees, panting, screaming, yelling. And all 20 people from the other side of the studio, the music stopped and they were clapping.
Does that sound humiliating in any way? It totally was. But it was also super cool because everyone was like, oh my God, you did it. And I was like, oh.
It's great.
Yeah.
It was a great supportive moment.
Okay.
It was great.
All right. So and then I almost died.
So yes, one of the things that I think is unique about this book is the longevity aspect of it. But I think to take a little bit of a step back, and for everyone that I see in this room, the book is written for us. It is the landscape of fitness is in a sense it's pigeonholed, because the way that we have been taught to look at fitness is to look inside of the setting of a gym, and that's the industry, that's the environment, which is helpful for a lot of people. But if we take a step back and we say, hey, look, what problems are we trying to solve? We don't always have to solve those problems inside of a gym. The world of fitness is vast, and the starting point for a lot of people is not inside of a gym. The starting point is just through connection, and that's why I gave that example of what Kate did, and it probably did feel supportive that people were clapping for you.
That was awesome.
So, like, first principles always in a fitness practice has to be connection, and I think we have a tendency to look at it, if we don't have a fitness practice, we have a tendency to look at, like, I have to do this, or I'm checking the box, or this is what's prescribed to me. What I want to help people understand is that you first really, to have a meaningful, sustainable practice, you have to be connected to something that you're doing. Now, in my world, in your world, in the gym, it comes through competition. It comes through camaraderie. It comes through community. It comes through inspiration. It comes through good coaching. Some of you can relate to that, but really, ultimately, at the end of the day, it's a skill to learn what connection is through your movement practice, whatever that might be. And so when we talk about longevity, we have to begin to talk about, like, hey, are you really connected to the practice that you have? And if you're not, here's what I would say, it's an emotional connection. It's a connection that you feel once you've done it. And that could mean, and a lot of times we pull from our past. Like, I look out amongst you guys, and I'm like, I played soccer with a lot of you guys for a lot of years, and we had a lot of really intense training sessions, and sport brings that out, and it's no surprise that for me, I like that. I like being in a competitive environment, and I utilize that as part of my fitness practice. Not everybody's like that. You have to find the things that you like. Was it dance? Was it whatever it is, that creates a starting point. Now, that's the starting point for sustainability. When I was writing the book, I knew I had to bring that to life, but I knew I also had to bring it to life in a tangible way. So I came up with these 5 sort of, they're these fitness tests that really express, they help you understand not only what your starting point is, but they provide a landscape for you to understand where you fit in amongst age and gender, not just amongst people who are, I go to the gym every day and I can back squat, swing a kettlebell, and do burpees and run. But what I did was I sort of looked at the blue zones and I was like, oh, there's actual blue zones for fitness. And so if you do the research, and what you do is you look around, you're like, hey, where are people thriving? Where are people living longer, healthier, later onset of disease? They're more functional, and you can find places that don't have core power yogas. They don't have CrossFits. They don't have Barry's boot camps. They're places like where you live. Tell us.
Nicoya, Costa Rica.
That's right. Some of them are blue zones, and you find the research that was done there on things that we can express inside of a gym that help you predict longevity. Best example from the book is this: Switzerland, bottom 3 in healthcare cost per capita, top 3 in the world in life expectancy. They have the number 1 ranked innovation in healthcare in the world. So, example, they got rid of their school buses 10 years ago. No school buses. Everybody walks to school. It's called a pedibus. And so what happens is, wherever you're at, there's a meeting place in your neighborhood, you meet with your neighbors, you walk to your school with an adult, and then an adult meets you at school and walks you back. So they're walking. What they wanted to do, and this was what I found interesting, I found a study that the government ran, 7,000 people, and they asked them to sit down, ages, I think, 44 to 64. They said, sit to a chair that's 18 inches, these chairs are probably 18 inches, and stand all the way. How many times can you do it in 1 minute? Because they wanted to correlate what lower body strength endurance was in terms of life expectancy, and specifically they were looking for heart disease. What they found was the mean number for that age group, broken down into gender, was 50. They could squat and touch a bench 50 times and stand up in 1 minute. If you're like, I have no idea what that means, when we're done here today, go home, put a stopwatch on yourself and see what that means.
Or we could do that, we could just
Sure,
keep the chairs out.
everybody stand up, let's do it right now. But my point is, these are ways that a culture expresses fitness, and we can utilize that. They're simple ways. You don't need to be a member of a gym, but there's simple ways to be like, hey, where do I fit in? And then not only where do I fit in, but A, does that give me a starting point? And then B, that gives me tangible data. It lets me know, like, hey, the people who can do 50 or more squats to a bench have a 31% less risk of heart disease later in life. So that's one. The other example was, that I really liked, was the 50-year-olds, I think it was 50 years old, if you can run a mile in 8.5 minutes, the risk of diabetes went down by something like 70%, which is shocking. Later onset of any comorbidities, but it was these ideas of looking into these cultures in different places in the world where they were expressing fitness, but they weren't in the world of fitness. So that's what those 5 tests are.
We'll come back to the 5 tests, but I guess I'm curious though, like, what made you think, oh, I need to look at longevity? Like, I mean, was there something that, like, it's bigger than what I'm doing?
Yes, I knew I had to look at longevity because I knew that the generation of, I knew what was working for the people that I was working with and for myself. I knew it would come to an end. I knew that this idea of go, or whatever it was that we were doing for fitness was just check the box. And I knew that we needed a different path forward. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
Okay.
Well, and maybe this is where we talk a little bit about that adaptation cycle and like what that is and what that means in context of all of this.
Yeah, so, let me just, I'm gonna put a pin in that real quick and just come back to it, but what I really wanted to say was that in our 20s and 30s, fitness looked different because it just worked. I mean, it just did. Like, you could do whatever she was doing and it worked. I could follow whatever diet he was following and it just worked because our bodies adapted pretty quickly. And as we age, things change. I think we all have experienced that. And so, I mean, we're losing bone density, we're losing lean muscle. And so now our fitness has to change. And so what I encourage people to do is take a look at what we call the adaptation cycle. It's really simple. There's 4 things that go into it. There has to be a stimulus. A stimulus means it could be exercise, but it has to be something that gives you fatigue, short-term fatigue and long-term fatigue. So what that means, and this applies to everybody, I'll use myself for an example. When I run on a treadmill, I have to get out of breath in order for there to be that stimulus. My mom, who's 85 years old, when she goes for a walk, she needs to walk up a hill. And we look the same at the end of a 2-minute walk or a 2-minute interval. We're out of breath. That's short-term fatigue. It has to happen. And then there has to be long-term fatigue, meaning the next day I should feel like, oh, like my body's sore, my muscles are sore, I'm tired. Same thing with my mom, who's 85 years old. then there has to be recovery. I have to allow my body to recover. And only then does adaptation take place. But you can, and this kind of gets into like looking under the hood a little bit when it comes to fitness and thinking of who you are. Sort of break this down into two categories. I'm an overtrainer, someone who overdoes it. That's me. I don't allow myself to rest or recover. So I don't see the adaptation that I want. And then there's undertrainers, people who don't reach high enough. And then again, they don't see the change that they want to see. And there's a balance, but the funny thing is the balance is different for everybody. And it changes even more as we age. Because I have an 18-year-old son. He can go 5, 6, 7 days a week, and he'll still continue to progress. But if I do that, I start to break down really quickly. And the pattern is different for each of us. The key is finding that pattern, finding that I can train, like now I know, like I can train 3 days in a row, and then I need to rest for 2 days, and then I can come back to it. But it takes us a while to kind of figure out what that pattern is.
We're just going off all sorts, I mean, I'm
Yes,
just gonna, yeah, that's good. But that made me think about, kind of the role of stress
Yeah.
in both overtraining and undertraining, and if you could give some examples of how people don't take that in, if you don't take stress into consideration, whether it's physical or emotional, how does that affect you if you wanna stay fit?
Yeah, so like emotional stress plays a part in this. And I think you'll find a lot of connection between like the emotional part of fitness and how that really affects how your fitness practice should express itself. I use an example when I was with United. We tracked heart rate variability. Heart rate variability is it's a way to gauge whether or not you're ready to train. And there were two things that I noticed. One is after a big game, if guys that didn't play, but it was a stressful, close game, so high level of stress, but low level of physical demand, their readiness was still low because it was emotionally taxing for them. That's one thing I noticed. The other thing I noticed was when I would check their heart rate variability, if I showed them what their readiness was and it was low, guess what they played like that day? They were horrible. But if I didn't show it to them, they had no idea what the reading was. And so like these things are strong connections to how we begin to think about how we should train each day. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I just wanna jump to like, so people come to your gym all the time,
Yep.
and sometimes they're stuck, and that's
Yep.
why they come to you.
Yep.
What do you do? How do you approach that? Like, what are some of the things you do to?
Back to the basics. 100%. Always back to the basics. So this is figuring out how to get unstuck is always going back to the basics. So I'll use an example. So I'll use an example of a player who came in to play soccer for United. Manny, you were the coach. Brought a player in, was supposed to be phenomenal, ended up that he just was in a rut, couldn't figure it out. And I worked on fitness with him, I worked on strength with him, I was useless, and he just wasn't getting better. And here's what it took. He actually showed up at my doorstep, and we become friends, and we went for a walk, and I got to know him. And what happened was, he ended up sharing with me what originally got him into the sport. It was part of his family, he loved going out on Sundays and watching his dad play. He loved kicking the ball in the backyard with his dad. Brought him back to what he actually enjoyed, and that's what turned him around. Just kind of going back to the basics. And for most of us, that's sort of what helps us get unstuck too. It's kind of thinking about what are the pieces that I really, if I have a practice and it's not working, why did I get into this in the first place? I think that's helpful for us to kind of constantly go back to it. I get it, things change as we age, but there's always a way to kind of really, you gotta look under the hood and figure out what it is that you want out of your practice and what it is that you enjoy, like what connects you to it, or what did connect you to movement in the first place.
Okay, so say you get to that point.
Yep.
You figure out the connection, and then what? Like, what do you, like, I come in, I'm like, oh yeah, I actually love running with my friends.
Yep,
because
great.
I get
Yep.
to hang out with my friends.
Yeah, so this part you might not wanna hear.
Me personally, or everyone?
Everybody.
Okay.
But there is science to it, and as much as I talk about like the emotional connection to fitness and how important it is to, I mean, your fitness practice should be something that you don't dread. It should be something that you're like, I can't wait to do this. And whatever that is, the starting point is important. And that's first principles. But then there's two other things that have to happen to make this meaningful, impactful. And one of those things is you gotta be a critical thinker around your fitness journey. At our age, I said this before, but what works for me is not gonna work for you. What works for her is not gonna work for her. And so you gotta really understand who you are and what works for you. How do you do that? You've gotta tinker around. You've gotta put yourself in an environment where there's more than one option. You've gotta be willing to experiment. And then once you become a critical thinker, you can sort of think your way through what's good for me, what's not good for me. Now, this is a different concept, by the way, because most of us have a fitness practice and we're like, I just show up at this time on this day and I do the thing. And so once you start to become a critical thinker and you start to think like, hey, how's my body feel? Am I ready to train? I can apply the adaptation cycle to this. Then there has to be progression. And that's really important for us. So remember, we are slowly losing muscle, we're slowly losing bone density as we age. And so if I just continue to do the same thing I was doing before I started to lose muscle and bone density, it's not gonna change anything. I need progression. There needs to be some kind of a progression in my movement practice. This is probably the place where it was most difficult to express in the book, but unfortunately, yoga is great. All Pilates is wonderful. They're great movement practices, but strength training and weight training is one of the things I talk a lot about in the book, and how important that is, especially as we age. And what has to happen is the muscle has to have enough demand on it so that it responds. And we need external load to be able to do that. Caveat is that it's a skill. Lifting weights is a skill. And if we've never done that in our life before, you have to learn how. It's like learning an instrument. You have to start very basic, and then you can slowly build on that skill until you become functional.
I can attest to that. Actually, I'm just like thinking back to these, like, because I would just work with Aaron at first, and he'd be like, no, you can go higher, and my legs would wobble. Like, I'm hypermobile and not very stable, or I don't have good range of motion, something, all of those things. But I went to a class yesterday, and my knee was like doing this crazy thing, and I was like, oh my God, I have to go back to the small group with Priscilla. I gotta go where somebody can like keep their eye on me, because I have no idea what I'm doing here. And I spent a year. It's hard. I mean, it's hard.
It's hard. It should be hard, and it should continue to get. You know, one of the questions people always ask me is like, they're like, oh my gosh, this is so hard. Is it gonna get any easier? And I'm like, no. To be honest with you, it shouldn't get any easier. It should continue to progress and get harder. That's a good movement practice.
That's annoying sometimes. I mean, but it's so funny because one of the things in your book, you say you have to be able to do hard things and you have to be willing to fail. And for me, I like that. Yeah, I'm up for hard things, and kind of this reframing, like you are making progress if you are failing to get there, which is that's not how we think about failure in our society. So, Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I will tell you that it's not surprising that the patterns that we have in our jobs, in our families, in our relationships, those patterns are the same patterns that you have when it comes to your fitness practice. And I, as a coach, I see those all the time. And what a better environment there's to watch someone go through those patterns, and what a safe environment it is to have them be able to change those patterns. And failure is scary. It's scary for all of us, but being able to do that in a gym is a safe place to kind of experiment. And you can, this is where most people end up growing. If they're willing to, like I said, look under the hood and understand why it's so scary and what it is that's holding them back. And there's growth that takes place there. That's the rewarding part for me. I love that part.
Can you give an example of like, I mean, without naming them, of course, for real, but like something that you saw somebody really come up against that wall and push through it failure-wise, or the change that happened in the gym affected the rest of their life?
Yeah, I mean, working with young athletes there's a lot there, and so working with young athletes, and I have a great example.
Go for it.
I knew this girl, and she was 15 years old. This is a great example. She's 15 years old, and she wanted to be a really good cross-country runner. And she just couldn't figure it out. She couldn't get her head wrapped around what type of intensity it took. There was a big gap between that. And she was scared. There was fear there. Every time she would get out of breath, the system would sort of shut down. And eventually, over time, because she found a connection, she found something she enjoyed doing. So I was helpful up to a certain point, and she just couldn't figure out how to break through. But then she started taking classes with other people, and it ended up that she liked competition. She really enjoyed being competitive in a healthy and fair way. And when she started getting into classes, she thrived, and she ended up breaking through. But what was interesting, because it's my own daughter, is that then she changed. She went from shy and a little bit unsure to now all of a sudden confident and open and able to talk to people and laugh. It was great. She's sitting right there.
Do you want to comment on that? You can have words with your dad after, if you need to.
But that was a really cool transformation to see, and that took place over the course of a couple of years, actually. Yeah, that was a good one.
Okay, we're going to talk a little bit of writing and how it felt, because,
Yeah.
and then we'll open up for Q&A. But
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about kind of why you felt like you needed to have this be a book, kind of goals for that, and then maybe some of the most, if something surprised you, or most challenging things in pulling the book together, writing the book.
Mm-hmm. I felt like it had to be a book because I felt like it had such a unique perspective coming from working with professional athletes on the science and performance side of it, and then working with normal people. And I thought, like, there's just such a big gap between the science of sport and what people are doing for fitness. And so I wanted to share those experiences and close the gap. That's where the idea came from. That's where the thought came from. And I wanted to create a more open and diverse, I wanted fitness to be more open to anybody, and I wanted to create a foundation Because a lot of times it's just like, hey, like, go do this yoga class, or take this Zumba class, or start with this walking group, and those are all great, but what I wanted people to know is that you are gonna run into problems as you age. We all will have comorbidities that we run into. And we have to have the knowledge to be able to think about how we progress in order to treat ourselves, essentially. So that was how I had the idea for the book. Then I came and talked to you, and you were like, I had no idea I was like, I have no idea how this works. You were like, write a query letter. And I was like, what is that?
No, I actually said, don't do that. I said, don't do that. I said, write a book proposal.
Oh, yeah, write a book proposal, that's
Don't
right.
query anyone until
Yeah.
you have a book proposal.
That's right.
What did you do?
Yeah, sorry, so that's what happened.
No, that's not what happened. You wrote the query
I
letter
wrote the query letter and then I sent it out. I had no
without the
idea.
book, without the book proposal.
Without the book. I had no idea how this worked, so I wrote the letter and I sent it out, and
Even though I told you not to do
they told
that.
me not to do it. And then someone bought it.
No, that's not what happened.
What happened?
The agent said, I'm interested.
That's right.
Give me a book proposal.
So I had no idea how this whole thing worked. I was like, she said she said book proposal, query letter. I was like, I just want to write a book. And so what happened was, yes, I got everything turned around. And
So then I said, okay, dude, I have 10 days to help you, and then I'm leaving town,
That's right.
and I'm quite annoyed.
Yes,
Because I went and did the thing that I told you not
Yeah.
to do.
yeah. Oh, hold on. Let me tell you, guys, I want to tell you a story about why I hired Kate in the first place. So, because I work well, and this is also why I married my wife. I work well when someone is the opposite of me, meaning someone's very direct and tells me exactly, like, direct feedback. I like it straight. I don't handle it very well, but I need it. Okay, so this is Donnie, Kate's husband, and we were all living together. This is Amos, and the three of us were playing soccer for the Minnesota Thunder, and we were living in an apartment. I don't remember, Timmy, if you were there. No, you weren't living with us. Okay, sorry. The three of us were living together in this apartment, and it was right down the street, by the way. And I wouldn't call it a girlfriend, but kind of a girlfriend. She was an intern for the Minnesota Thunder. Her name was Jenny, and she was super nice. And it was my birthday, and I went out for a run, and I came back, and Jenny was there, and she had surprised me
She'd
with
been there for hours baking a cake.
She baked a cake, a carrot cake. She baked a carrot cake. But I had just finished a run, and I don't like carrot cake. And
Are you sure it was carrot cake?
I think so. But anyway, and I was like, plus I was healthy. I was like, I don't really eat cake anyway. And so I walked into the apartment. She was like, happy birthday, made this cake.
There were a bunch of people there. It was like a party.
Okay. And then I walked back to the kitchen where, like, through everybody. I'm back in the kitchen, and Jenny was like, have a piece of cake. And I was like, no, thanks. And then I turned around, and I walked out, and Kate was there. And I'm not going to use profanity, but she was like, you will go back in there and have a piece of cake, whether you like it or not. And I was like, oh, damn. And I
She
did.
spent a lot of time baking this cake.
Yeah, and that's I was like, yeah, okay.
That's why you hired me.
That's why I hired you, because I was like, I need someone who is direct and very honest with me. And you were kind of nice, but direct and honest. So anyway, the query letter or whatever happened, I put it out there. Then an agent got it and wanted it, and then you were like, I told you not to do that because we didn't have anything else.
No,
prepared."
I mean, by that point, then we did. Once
Okay.
your agent took you on,
That's
it's
right.
because we'd already done the book proposal.
Yes.
Yeah, so
But-
you were in the clear then.
The beginning felt rushed, very rushed.
Just for you.
Yeah, it felt rushed, that's right. But it was all new to me, so I didn't know what to expect. I was like, okay, this process is gonna be like this. Then, I started writing we had the chapters laid out, and I started writing, and I was not confident. I was uncertain, and you helped me.
You have to do hard things.
You have to do hard
Yeah.
things.
You have
That's
to get
right.
ready to fail.
That's right. And I learned a lot about the process. I gained some confidence as we went through. And then, I don't know, how long was that? 6 months, 8 months that it took?
Yeah, 8 months.
8 months. I have a favorite place in it's not actually in my house. I have a detached garage, it's my gym. There's a gym in my detached garage. It has a wood burning stove, and it's my favorite place to be, and I would spend a lot of time writing out there. Kate would say, I want to see chapters 2 and 3, and she'd give me a deadline, because she has other things to do. And I would give it to her, and she would provide feedback, and it was quite a process for me. But I really enjoyed it. I liked the solitude. I liked being alone, writing. I liked getting the feedback. I liked having to go back. I think there was one point where I was like, I know what a runner's high is, but there's also something that feels like a writer's high, I guess, where, I don't know, I was able to kind of really put on pages what I really wanted to express, and that felt good. That was really good.
Awesome. Okay, let's turn it over
Yeah.
to the audience
Yeah.
for questions, because we'll have books and stuff too. So, questions for Erin, and I'll bring this over if it reaches you.
Can be anything.
Thank you. Erin, you know that I do some writing. I did some writing, academic writing. And oftentimes after I would read a draft, I would go, did I say that? Or another time I would go, wow, that was so smart. Could you share those kinds of things with us that you experienced while you were writing?
Yes. Yes, there were often times where I would write something and it felt like it was more for me, and I enjoyed it, but it probably wasn't the right fit for what my audience was. But those were still valuable moments. There were also times I relied on her a lot, to be honest with you. She would let me know, yes, this is good. There were times where you were like, this spoke to me, and that felt good. I couldn't imagine trying to muddle my way through this without that type of feedback.
Well, I think this speaks to anybody who's doing any sort of creative endeavor that you're in your head a lot, and to have somebody just outside of it say, I don't understand this, or ask questions. I ask a lot of questions, like, what does this mean?
Yeah.
There was one scene, one thing that you were talking about being young parents, and Christy, you had 4 kids, and you were having this business, and you had this vacation away, and you slept for like 3 days, and you were like, I woke up and everything was, I was like, what the hell does Chris, she's
That's
probably
right.
so pissed, she's been pissed at you
That's
for like a decade.
Yeah.
You're now just
Yeah.
realizing,
Yeah,
what?
so let me just really quickly just say, so we had Open Fit, I was working with United, I was head of performance for Christina Koznick, who was an Olympic skier. It was crazy, we had 4 kids at the time, and we had not taken a vacation, it was 10 years, and I was like, we took it, Christine was like, you are sleep deprived, you're a nightmare to be around. She was like, we're going on vacation. We went on vacation. We went on like a 5-day vacation. I slept the first 3 days. I woke up after day 3 and I was like, oh my gosh, the world seems brighter. This is amazing. I wrote about it in the book, and your comments to me after that reminded me of when Jenny brought me a carrot cake. Because you were like, how are you gonna do this and not even mention Christine? And so, yes, thank you for that.
Yeah. I mean, that wasn't what I was gonna, like, totally, but I mostly like that, when you get in your head with whatever it is you're doing, if you don't have that outside perspective,
Oh
so
my gosh, yeah.
any sort of creative, somebody who can kind of check you on it is great. I mean, it's just like a coach. I mean, it's
That's
just
100%
exactly what you
right.
do is what I was doing, but like in a less painful way, I think, than what you were doing. If
Yes.
we're talking assault bike, that's for sure.
Yes, but yes, like helping me understand. So I couldn't see some things that you could see, and you would help me understand those. Yeah.
Other questions? I don't think this is gonna reach.
Well, I can yell.
Yeah, yeah.
So what I glean from what you're saying partly is that you have to get to a point where you suffer. I mean, you can do Pilates, you can do yoga, you can do long, slow distance, but if you're not pushing yourself, and you're not breathing hard, and you're not suffering, although you're enjoying the suffering, what is sort of the magic bullet, if there is one, the magic power for someone who's, approaching, say, 70, 80, 90, 60, I'm not gonna label myself. But like you have to push yourself. What is maybe the couple things you might say that we should come away from today, besides reading your book, that you could convey?
Yeah, I would say start very slow and progress very slowly. I think the biggest mistake that people make is they hear like, oh, I have to get out of breath. There's gotta be discomfort, and on day one, there is out of breath and discomfort, and that doesn't become sustainable. As a matter of fact, we're at New Year's right now, so people are, I'll make my New Year's resolution, and part of that is gonna be healthy, and I'm gonna start to exercise. And I think I just read that 73, maybe it's 83% of people who start a movement practice as a New Year's resolution don't make it past week 3 for 3 reasons. Number one, it's boring. That's the point of connection. It's gotta be entertaining, it's gotta be fun, it's gotta be engaging. Number 2, it's too intense. And so what people really have to do is say, like, hey, it's actually a skill. I gotta work on this skill. I've gotta take it slowly. And then the third thing was they don't see the results they want. And so yes, start very slow and then progress very slowly. I hope that helps.
Thanks. So I was just wondering about maybe between you two, you obviously have a good rapport. I read your book, I had the opportunity to read it before, and I've already integrated all the stuff that I can, but I'm wondering about the nature in which you present yourself in the book and how personal it is. And did you draw that out of him or push him to that, or was that something, Aaron, that you always wanted to have in your book?
Yeah, I wanted to be relatable, and so my point of being relatable was I had just gone through cancer. So I was diagnosed with cancer almost 2 years ago, and we had just started working on the book, and my fitness practice came to a dead stop for quite some time, and my body changed, and I was stuck, and the treatment that I was on kept me stuck, and so I wanted people to understand that I'm now having to apply these principles to myself to get unstuck. And that took some help from Kate to figure out the best way to talk about that.
But that part came out easy. I mean, I didn't have to push you to be vulnerable about it. And
No.
actually, that was one of the questions I was gonna ask is about, the importance of personal story. There's a lot of personal stories in the book, both yours and people you've worked with, and why was that so important to you?
Yeah, that was important to me because I wanted people to understand that these are real circumstances for real people, and everyone has a different path, and it's been my privilege to be able, over the past 25 years, to be able to help people kind of figure those paths out. What I think you'll find is the through line for all those paths is sort of this, the willingness for people to, again, look at themselves and their patterns and then kind of bring them to their fitness. And I did the same thing for myself when I was going through cancer and treatment. I had to really understand what was keeping me stuck. I ended up, I'm in survivorship now, but I ended up learning a lot more than just my fitness practice was a reflection of what my life was like at the time. And I'd like to think that my fitness practice has changed, and so has my life and the relationships that I'm in.
Other questions?
Is your next one gonna be on nutrition? Kind of the same thing, because that would be I'd be very interested in
Go, yeah, that was gonna be another question.
Yeah.
Good job, Tim.
So, no, but a lot of the work I'm doing now is around exercise oncology, which is, it's new, it's a newer field, and it's how we use exercise to help with cancer patients for better outcomes, prehabilitation, during treatment, and in survivorship. I guess it's, I feel strongly connected, like personally connected to that. And so I'm doing work for that right now, and I'm learning a lot, and I like that. I like the process. I thought, to be honest with you, I thought that my first visit back into a hospital working with cancer patients, I thought that it would be hard, but it was the opposite. It was rewarding, and I was thankful, and that felt good. So I'm leaning into that right now.
Awesome. One last quick.
I got one for you. So it's a little bit to Kate and then to Levy. I think, so Kate, just, we chuckle, but Levy has this ability to really believe in people and believe in their capacity to adapt and change. And it's a very, but physical, and it's a very kind of raw experience when you're in the gym with them, or if you work with him, or if you get to know Levy, he does a great job of just believing in you and your capacity. What was it like working with Levy, try to get that out in a book? Like, how does that come from that physical manifestation into?
I mean, honestly, I think it does come across in the book, but I don't think that I would have been able to help see that on the page until I worked with him, because I was able to see what was happening in the studio, and this sort of annoying and actually very effective thing that he does, which is like, okay, now you're gonna do 12 calories. And he smiles, like, as it's supposed to be a fun thing, like, and then you just are like, okay, and also I'm very competitive. I mean, Donnie's like, yeah, I'm competitive, but not usually in this realm. But unless, like Scrabble, we used to really play some hardcore Scrabble in our house, but that was a really interesting thing. Like, there's a pretty subtle, kind of funny, low-key way to deliver, you're gonna do this and you're gonna hate it, but you're gonna feel really good afterwards. Like, but I remember the first time he was like, all right, do 6 calories in a minute. And I was like, oh my God, I mean, I was in terrible shape. And then like, he was like, do 6 calories in 30 seconds. And then he went home and told you, Christine, he was like, Kate can do some hard things. And then all he had to do was tell me I could do hard things, which I already knew I could do. He was like, well, you could do hard things. You had a premature baby. I was like, yeah, I could do some hard things. But there's a belief, I think, in everybody, and I see it in the gym through all the coaches, but like, there's a belief that they all have in everyone who shows up there. And I think he's so good at illustrating that in a way that's non-threatening to people. And that's how the book feels to me. It feels like a non-threatening, very encouraging, like, you've got this, and this is how you've got it, kind of guidebook.
Yeah, I think that's right. I did, and just so you know, I learned a lot of those skills from you. I mean, we worked together. He was the head coach for Minnesota United for I don't know how many years, but and you too. I mean, I specifically remember there was a game at the LA Galaxy Metrodome, LA Galaxy, and I remember watching Amos give the pregame talk. It was the biggest game of those guys' lives, right? And I remember watching Amos give the pregame talk, and one of the things I took away from it was like, every person in this room is walking out that door to play believing that they will win this game, which they never should. There's not a possibility. What happened to them? We tied. Yeah. So I learned those skills from you guys. That was believing in your athletes.
Awesome. Okay. Okay. So,
Yes, so we're gonna head, but before we break, we're gonna head out here, but you also have 3 books of your books out here for sale. Could you just really quickly give us an idea of
what they are.
what they are?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I have a memoir about my older daughter's premature birth that is called Ready for Air. And then I have a writing guide for mothers. That's a lot of my work has been with women writers and particularly mothers who've written about hard and not so hard things. And then I wrote another memoir, so my writing but not my story, about a family with twin sons who have severe autism, but they're incredible marathon runners. So I helped her get her story out in the world as well.
Yeah. And where are you going next week?
And tomorrow morning, nothing like cramming it in right for 6:15. I'm going to the airport to go for a week of my own writing. San Juan Island, Washington. I'm going to see some whales. Hopefully, if everyone can just put those whale vibes out in the world, that'd be good. And I talk to anybody or respond to email during that week.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, well, I will just close this out by saying thank you guys so much. I appreciate your support. Thank you for being here. Kate, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
And anything else we need to say?
No. Thanks, Majors and Quinn.
Yes, thank you guys.
My favorite bookstore in the Twin Cities.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.